in any community. And this is the great fourth discourse in St. Matthew's Gospel. I guess if we had to say it in two or three words, we'd say little children, the little ones, and forgiveness. They're key in our life as church. They're key in any parish. Those two realities, little children or the little ones, and forgiveness. So let's have a little bit of a look at this now. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Who really is greatest in this kingdom? How do we get into the kingdom? Jesus changes us a little bit. How are we going to get into the kingdom? We're going to get into the kingdom if we don't worry about power. If we're into power, we're blind to what the kingdom's about. We can't even understand what the kingdom is. In the ancient Near East, children were non-persons in a sense. They were lovable, as any parent loves their child, but socially they were insignificant. They were nobodies socially. And so when Jesus says, unless you become like children, in a sense he's not saying unless you become childlike, you have the wonder of children or you have their trust or whatever. It's not so much that. It's rather, unless you have the lack of power of children, unless you understand that, you're not going to find the kingdom. So we've got to, in a real sense, have a sense of humility about us, knowing who we are and being comfortable about who we are, and not go after status and power in the kingdom. Our will to be great, to be noticed, needs a bit of curbing. That's what this is all about. Now, if I could just add a little bit on scandalising the little ones, and that's become very important with sexual abuse in the church, and that's the literal meaning, of course, and it's better for a millstone to be tied around our neck and thrown into the sea if we're scandalising somebody, some of those little ones. And that's used, this text is used, of course, in a whole debate on sexual abuse of children, pedophilia and all of that, with good reason, because we know, as we've never known before, what damage we can do to little ones, sexually, psychosexually, but also to the whole idea of faith and love and trust and all of those things. So with good reason we've taken that text in that literal sense. But we've also got to understand that Jesus really meant it as the little children are the little ones, meaning people who are not into power, but the ordinary people. People who we would class as perhaps simple, not simple-minded of course, but just average, ordinary people. We cannot ever scandalise them. What does that mean? Well, it means, as the scripture scholars tell us, that all people have their own way to God, and we can't act in a superior way to people who perhaps their way to God is a little bit simplistic perhaps. And for us today, that becomes a big question, because some people love simple devotions, other people love a spirituality of the heart which goes perhaps a little deeper, other people love meditation, contemplation, which is perhaps a greater call even still. But there can be no sense of superiority and no sense of ridicule. Once we do that, once we say, my way is better than your way, my devotion is superior to yours, that's exactly what will cause scandal and upset and hurt. And the Lord doesn't want that. There are many ways to God. So the most pastoral way is to be accepting and affirming of everybody in their way to God. Of course, being careful if it's bordering on superstition or lacking orthodoxy and all of that, and at times we need to step in, but in general, the general principle is don't scandalize anybody in their approach to God. Don't act in a superior way. Don't ridicule them. And then a little bit on the lost sheep. Go after the lost sheep. It's always been pretty important to me, because when I was back in the parish in Adelaide, there was a fabulous former priest, Scottish, wonderful man, and he'd always come up to me and say, "What are you doing about the lost sheep?" You know? So it's always, yeah. The 99, they're there, and that's marvellous. We thank God for that. But we're called to go after the one that's lost. And from Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 16, I will seek out the lost. I will bring back the stray. That's God speaking. And that's, of course, as Jesus saw things too. And that's, of course, as we try as a community to see things as well. God never gives up on the marginalised or the lapsed. Never, ever gives up. And if we're a real community, we can never give up on the marginalised and the lapsed. I'm reminded of a little nursery rhyme. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep and doesn't know where to find them. Leave them alone and they'll come home, dragging their tails behind them. If we say that about the church, it's not true. Leave them alone. They'll eventually come back to Mass or to the church. Will they? If we're a Bo Peep church, that's what we'll believe. But we're the church of the Good Shepherd. We're the church that goes out after the lost sheep. And that's a massive challenge to all of us. So if we're content just with who we are, and we haven't got a sense of reaching out and trying to bring others back in, we're a little bit like Bo Peep. Sorry about that. Now this next thing is, so that's the little ones, basically. And the second thing I just want to say a word about is forgiveness. Now this is an extraordinary thing. How central forgiveness is to community life. Of course, and this is the community of Matthew. Every community has to have structures of dealing with conflict and of dealing with when somebody just shouldn't be allowed. We always talk about a rotten apple and all that, but it's true in a community. We have to deal with people that are really destroying the community. So Jesus gave the binding and loosing. He gives that to the community. He gives us the power to deal with difficult situations, even to excommunicate. We know that means to ask a person to no longer come to the community. As we understand it, as Catholic Christians, to come to Holy Communion. It's the same thing, really. But for us, at the heart of community life is going to Holy Communion. Community, communion. It's central for our spirituality. Central for us. So the early church, too, after St. Matthew, developed structures for dealing with people who we believed had really cut themselves off from who we are. And they were people who were apostate, who had actually declared openly they were no longer Christians, or they were adulterers, and back in that society, that just destroyed family life more than it does today. Or they were murderers. And they joined a group in the church called